hopefully some
Loads
of
of
that
good stuff in
resonates
there.
with you. And over to you, Eileen.
Excellent. Well, I just want to go back and kind of there's bits I'm going to download, there's bits I'm going to read. Yes, right then. So here we go. So my session this week is on resource management, and it's done primarily because we had a request in on the House of PMO website as to kind of what we had in terms of resource management. So I thought I would just do a kind of a quick recap of some of the resources we've got and why we think, kind of Lindsay and I were just kind of discussing this. It's kind of still all very relevant to what we're doing now in and around PMOs. So I think for a long time, we had benefits management on the top of the list of things that organizations, and then obviously why kind of PMOs found the most difficult to do, really kind of getting some idea of kind of why were they investing the money in the projects and programs? How did they measure the benefits that kind of came through? And what we found over the last couple of years is that that's actually changed now, and resource management has gone to the top of the list. And I think there's a whole number of reasons behind that. Not just because there are more projects, and it's not related to the number of organizations that are outsourcing resource management and PMO services to other organizations. I think there is the whole kind of project economy, I think was the phrase that was kind of reinforced to me this week. But actually, in terms of the different ways we're delivering projects, much more kind of seeing lots more people in business as usual activities being involved in the delivery projects, and just the natural kind of volume of projects means that if we're not careful, that allocating people to projects is having a detrimental effect on business as usual, and therefore all of that kind of portfolio management element about kind of understand kind of what we're using on projects and what we're using on business as usual, is it the right mix, all kind of comes into play. And there is really a kind of a big role the PMO can play in this, which is why we have a number of resources. Just a couple of things that I'm kind of going to draw on today. So we did do a PMO managers lunch and do an inside PMO report back in 2017. I can't believe it was 7 years ago, but it's there. It's on the website. If you're a fully paid member, it's free to download. And there are other kind of pricings if you're a kind of a free member or not a member at all. But that's there to download. And we've been through it, still very relevant. And as I said, I'm going to pick up some of the points that you can read about more in that report. I think the other thing is when we were doing the competency framework, we also kind of recognized that these were key competencies of people in the PMO. When supporting projects, programs, and as mentioned, the portfolio level, and there's work to be done in centre of excellence. And the kind of key three competencies that splits over, it isn't just resource management, it also includes capacity management and capability development. And one of the things we identified during the lunch is these three, although are separate competencies, there are separate services and kind of separate activities, they're all absolutely intertwined. And so we came up with this model, which we called the circle of resource management, and said, kind of there are three kind of key areas that need to be looked at. There's a resource segment, a project segment, and a portfolio segment, so which I'm just kind of going to have a quick run through, just so we understand kind of the breadth of what we mean by resource management and increasing it in our organization. And I'm also going to touch on the service catalogue, the PMO service catalogue, because in there are a number of services and some hints and tips of implementing those services, which are also going to be helpful for us to be if we're addressing portfolio management in our organization. And I think part of the challenge is, as I've already said, these kind of three segments are fully intertwined. Very often in organizations, it's only one of these segments that is really causing a challenge, and either the organization hasn't got the bandwidth or the resources to actually address all of those three segments at once, so they have to focus on one. But I do think it's important that we look at what the interdependencies are with the other two segments, so we understand kind of some of the minimum things we need to put in place to help us address the one segment that's of challenge. Now, I'm already recognise that I'm talking at the kind of very fast, because I said to Lindsay, have I got 15 minutes or 2 hours? So I am going to kind of rattle through this. You can kind of go back if you've got any kind of questions, do stick them in chat and we'll kind of pick them up as we go through. So first of all, let's have a look at the portfolio segment of this resource management challenge. And this is really where we're talking about capacity management. Well, we're starting to look at an organization level, or it could be a department level or a divisional level, in terms of, have we got the right resources and the right number of resources to actually deliver what the organization wants. And we keep having to remind ourselves it isn't just about projects and programs. In particularly, and becoming more so, we have to recognize the resources across the organization and how they're going to be pulled on both delivery of projects and programs, but also on business as usual, and where those two and what the priority is around the projects against business as usual. So kind of a key role for us in that. And so the competence that belongs to this area is around capacity management. And in the PMO service catalogue, there are a number of services that we can put in place in order to help that. So, you know, you can see there from some of the kind of the circles within that we're talking about being able to forecast future resource needs. Now, I always find that really interesting, because it means that right at the inception of a project, we're going to have to start thinking about, well, actually, what do we expect the resource needs to be? Now, you know, we're not going to be able to say, well, you know, kind of Lorna's going to be needed on Monday afternoon in the afternoon of the 13th of September 2027. Yes, we're going to be talking kind of big kind of chunks and some building blocks to build that in. So actually kind of developing and maintaining an estimating framework that is not just kind of individual task level, but a kind of we often talk about kind of t-shirt sizing and at project level, is something that kind of sits within our role. And again, potentially looking at kind of resource tracking and capacity reports, so we can do that kind of reporting, insights and analysis back to senior management. And I think the other thing, and again, depending on kind of some of the tooling we've got, being able to provide that kind of what if, providing some options and some recommendations to help line managers, resource managers, senior managers to make the right decisions and the informed decisions on where they're going to be allocating their key resources. So quite a bit at kind of the capacity management level. And the danger is, if we don't have this capacity management level visibility, we're going to constantly be balancing and kind of fighting the kind of the detail down of trying to allocate resources to individual projects, because we just know we haven't got enough, and we're just continually kind of fighting that kind of that battle. So second segment we've got there in the report is the project segment. Now this is where we allocating individuals to projects and programs. So we're not doing, from a PMO perspective, we're not necessarily doing the allocation down to kind of tasks and activities that sits within the project. So this is where we start getting down to kind of named resources and understanding where the best kind of people are in order to do the various roles. So a couple of the kind of, this is the resource management competence from the competence framework. And in the service catalogue, there's some really good descriptions of some services about, actually, even though we may not make the decision on who goes on what project, but actually that process and facilitation of filling the roles and having some kind of generic role profiles for the different specialists on the types of projects. And again, some of the more detailed work we might do is actually kind of provide succession planning for some key roles, or actually facilitate the management of consultants and agencies. And one of the key things that I think is really helpful is we start recognizing resource dependencies across the projects and programs in the portfolio. So final section is down what we call the resource section. So this is akin to the competence of capability development. So it's all well and good saying, oh, I've got a project manager. Yes, they can kind of deliver a project. But if you've got a kind of a new junior project manager and you've got a huge complex project that's going to make or break the organization, perhaps that's not the best kind of project manager to put on that particular project. So part of our role, and essentially a lot of the time working with HR, so it's not something we necessarily do on our own, is actually kind of understand the detailed skill level that is required and start working together and developing some career paths and defining some strategies for acquiring and developing skills. Now, it may not be something we can do on our own, but definitely in terms of kind of working with HR. So, kind of what we often find in organizations, we've got really good project managers, but we haven't got any program managers. And therefore, as a resourcing strategy, we recruit in program managers when we're going to be delivering big programs rather than putting one of our project managers on there who may not necessarily make the best big job. So 3 circles of resource management. One of those might be where your particular challenge is, but I think it's recognizing how those other 2 segments fit together. Just also, we touched on an area that we'll change depending on your organization is the constraints that culture and context add. So we've got there some kind of in the report some real kind of challenges, real life challenges about why kind of we can't just put in a process and it works perfectly. And it's really interesting. Some of the hints and tips that we've got in the service catalog will help you overcome some of the context. So again, kind of the type of organization you work in. But we also recognize that culture can have a big part in, kind of who's allowed to have what resources. The very fact that a lot of organizations still struggle with the fact that projects have to take people from different parts of the business, and a project manager potentially has to look after and guides and allocates work to somebody who's not necessarily in their department. So if we've got a logistics project, I might have somebody from the sales department and somebody from the stores department, and I might have somebody on the IT department, and that real kind of that ability to kind of manage across the piece culturally just still doesn't work in a number of environments. So just a quick touch on some of the kind of the key tactics. And again, we can have some broader conversations outside of this session, but I just wanted to touch on a few that are in there. Is just when we're starting doing a portfolio level, we have to just recognize about when an organization, when is a project? It's often a question we forget because, good old Alan Sugar has named everything a project. My granddaughter comes home from school with a project for the weekend and we don't sit down and say, so Eva May, let's do some kind of stakeholder analysis and make sure there's a business case for doing your little bit of homework. So not everything, even though we might use the word project, actually kind of falls within the remit of the resource management and portfolio management processes. And when we're trying to describe a project, let's not get hung up on 27 different characteristics of a project. Let's think of 2 or 3 key characteristics that helps us to kind of size and shape the project and make some kind of big decisions on the big building blocks before we go into the detail. So this is for you, John, to respond to the subject, the comment I saw a little bit earlier on. When we're looking at the projects, don't worry about the tasks. That can be left down to the the project managers. And if we've got PMO analysts or coordinators, that's kind of where their focus is. When we're talking about the project segment, we're actually kind of talking at a high level of the skills that are required for the individual projects. And there's some real kind of skills there in terms of having multi-skilled individuals to do that. And don't be afraid of using spreadsheets. Yes, a lot of the work that I've done in implementing resource management, we're in the big danger if we try to embed some of those resource management processes too early into a tailorable tool. Unless we've proven the processes work, people will throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, your PPM tool is rubbish. And it's not rubbish, it's just been set up to support the process, which hasn't been really kind of tried out and tested in the organization. And then finally, in the resource segment, where we're kind of looking at the skills and capabilities of people who are involved in project delivery, it becomes really difficult if everybody's got their own job title and there's 700 different titles for what is a project manager, what is a junior project manager across the organization. And there's lots of frameworks out there. Obviously, you know, we've got the PMO competency framework, but there are a number of project management frameworks out there. Don't try to create your own. It is really hard work. We know how long it took us to do the PMO competency framework. So use something that's out there, but tailor it appropriately for your organization. That's my 15 minutes done.
Right, excellent, very, very good. You've got some comments there to have a look through, Eileen, at your leisure. So thank you very much.